So there might be a couple more people who are trickling in, but why don't we just go ahead and get started? So thank you everybody for coming today. I'm Rebecca Pringle. I am the Community Engagement and Development Coordinator here at the School for the Future of Innovation and Society at the College of Global Futures. And so it is my great pleasure today to introduce our speaker, who is going to talk to us about what innovation looks like in practice and the way that brings about meaningful change at his place of business, Argo Group, a global specialty insurance company. This is a subject in which I think all of us should be deeply interested about because innovation is a tool for driving change, whether that's in society or in industry. But it manifests itself and looks differently depending on the setting. And so the more that we are all able to understand the right environment and what innovation looks like when it succeeds and what the benefits are of it, the more we're going to be able to do it and do it better for all of us. Jeff Canfield is the head of innovation at Argo Group, a global commercial insurance carrier, where he seeks to transform ideas into positive, measurable change. He brings with him over 25 years in the insurance industry, including management roles at AIG and Amica Mutual, as well as SVP roles at Aspen Insurance and Argo. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science and history from the University of Richmond in Virginia. And he and his family reside in the New York City area. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Jeff Canfield.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for the introduction. Just confirming that you can hear me and can see my screen.
Yes and yes.
Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. Again, as Rebecca mentioned, I am the head of innovation for Argo Group, which is a mid-sized global specialty insurance carrier. And today's discussion is about insuring the future. And so with that, let's get started with the presentation. Let me see if I can advance the screen here. Give me 1 second. There we go. So insurance and innovation, that's the topic. And as a broad statement, I would suggest that insurance is not the most dynamic industry by reputation. And most people think about insurance as a necessary evil at times. But I will tell you that it is a very, very innovative and pretty fun industry at times. And while it's a sector that underpins so much of the economy and is so important to so many things that we do, I really look at the intersection of insurance and entrepreneurship. And so I'll just read a couple of statements here that I think are relevant to the rest of the presentation. The first is that entrepreneurs and visionaries need partners to help mitigate risk while changing the world. And effective risk management allows dreamers to, well, sleep at night. And so you think about what entrepreneurs need to get started. And insurance underpins so much of that process. Entrepreneurs cannot have access to capital markets or to loans without evidencing that they have insurance. Banks won't give them that financing. They have assets at risk. If there's an early claim as they're developing their business, that could end up killing the business unless it's protected by insurance. So there's all kinds of ways that that insurance can help launch new ventures, and I think that's really critical. At my company, again, which is Argo Group, we developed an innovation framework called Argo Innovates. Not a terribly creative name, but it really is our call to action, and it describes what we do. Now, this empowers frontline employees to pitch ideas directly to senior leaders, bringing meaningful change to the firm. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit of that, and let's go through the agenda. So first and foremost, I'm going to explain how we at Argo innovate. We have a pretty simple equation, which is that innovation equals creativity plus execution. I'm going to talk about ensuring the economy of the future. And then the third topic will be specifically about ensuring sustainability. I know that sustainability is on the front of many people's minds, especially here at ASU, which is great. And so let's talk about that as well. So Argo Innovates, what is it? What is the theory behind the practice? We launched Argo Innovates in early 2020, so it's not even a year old. And at its core, it's a portal that all employees at Argo can access, and they can submit ideas, innovations. They can vote up or down on innovations that have been submitted by their colleagues and friends. They can comment on those innovations. And most importantly, they can give their perspective. If they saw something at a previous company or in college that worked or didn't work, they can give that perspective. And that's how we launched this innovation portal. Now, as I said, we look at innovation as a pretty simple simple formula that is the marriage of creativity and execution. And while these two halves of the equation are both very important, I would argue that execution on the right is a little more difficult and more meaningful. On the creativity side, and I'll go through some of these themes, I think it's relatively easy to ask people for their ideas and to spur creativity, right? Everybody has some pretty good ideas. It's the execution side that can be tough. So first, on the creativity side, we really leverage crowdsourcing at Argo. And by crowdsourcing, I mean diversity of perspective. We want as many perspectives and voices as possible to participate in the process of iterating on the innovations that come through our portal. And ideally, it would be different perspectives. So maybe a claims handler, an underwriter, an actuary, one of our lawyers, as many perspectives as possible, the better. And so we always leverage that diversity. Also, this is an employee-led grassroots movement that we started. And I'll get into this a little bit further, but it's important that we did not want this to be driven from the C-suite down. We wanted this to be in the front lines, in the trenches, and have our employees lead this initiative. So I think that's really been meaningful for us. We also start with the notion of identifying customer needs. Now, for those that don't know the ins and outs of a commercial global specialty insurance company, our customers can be as diverse as retail brokers, wholesale brokers. We deal with reinsurance partners. We deal with managing general agents. And ultimately, we have policyholders that ultimately pay us the money, right, for our premiums. What we want to identify when we innovate is solving one of those stakeholders' problems. Everybody has a pain point. Everybody has a vision of what could be better or different. That's where we start our innovation process from. It's a bit of design thinking, and we can go into some of that detail. But what's important is that we do not require the solution in advance. When people submit ideas into our portal, we don't ask them to bring the ultimate solution. Now, they may have ideas about what might work or what might not work, but what we find is that the solutions generally appear and emerge from the process of solving that pain point. And so that's how we do it, and it's worked pretty well for us. On the execution side, it's all about culture and enhancing a culture that for us already exists. Now, entrepreneurship is baked into the DNA of Argo Group. We've always been a pretty entrepreneurial company. But I think what's interesting is that as we try to enhance the culture of innovation at our firm, it's always come from the top, right? Management has said, hey, we need to innovate, let's do these things, and employees are expected to sort of fall in line. What we did by launching that employee-led grassroots initiative was turn that on its head. We want all of the innovation to come from employees. And management's role is really just there to clear obstacles and provide the funding and the resources necessary to execute. And so one of the things that we've found really rewarding is this notion of agency. We want the employees of Argo to map their own future. That hadn't existed in the past. And what we do is when an idea comes into the portal, the first thing we do is have a calibration call where we have someone that knows a subject matter expert be on the call with the idea submitter, and they have an initial conversation about where this needs to go. Now, sometimes that initial person is the head of, say, HR at our group. And what people find really, first of all, sort of intimidating, but ultimately pretty rewarding, is that here's an employee that submitted an idea, and they're talking to the head of our HR. This is a C-suite executive person, the head of HR, and they're having an open dialogue about this person's idea. And I got more feedback after these initial calibration calls about, hey, I really feel like I have a voice now, and I'm talking to the head of HR about my idea. That didn't exist before. And so I think what's really important is that we are allowing employees to map their own future, map the future of Argo, and have that dialogue between our leaders and the people in the trenches. So that's been really great. We also really employ the notion of teaming. When you're iterating and innovating at Argo, you're never working alone. You're always in a team environment of some sort. We like to provide rewards. And so for those people that submit ideas into our portal, there are certain toll gates, and we pay out either cash, company stock. We can actually reward people with experiences. If your team has done something, we'll pay for a nice dinner. Or ultimately, this could be your next career at Argo. If you submit an idea that's a new business unit or a new product, and that's your passion, and you want to lead that new unit going forward, we can reward you with that sort of being your new career. And then finally, the innovation team, which is myself and a few other folks, our key task is matching the best ideas to the best resources, right? We have a limited number of resources in our company, and so we need to make sure that we're not wasting those. And so we try to make sure that we're attaching the best idea to the best available resource, and that's where that execution piece comes in. Now, here's a quick view of the state of innovation in insurance. As I mentioned, it's not the most glamorous of industries by reputation, but I'll tell you, a lot of very cool things are happening within the insurance business. So first of all, for a couple hundred years, since Lloyd's of London started back in the 1600s, insurance companies have gotten their revenue from policy premium, right? So we offer a promise to pay out on claims, and the policyholder pays us money, and that's how we get our premiums, our revenue. That's changing. And in the current state of affairs, insurance companies get a much bigger piece of the pie from services. And often that's risk mitigation services, meaning we want to help our policyholders avoid risk and losses in the first place. We have engineering services and other things that can help do that, and we'll get a fee from that. So it's not all about paying for things after they happen. It's about preventing losses before they happen and diversifying our revenue stream. So that's been a key driver of growth for us. I wonder if folks on the phone have heard about insurtechs. That's kind of a new term. You hear about fintech. Well, insurtech is basically a startup that is engaging with the insurance industry. Now, the conventional wisdom from 5 years ago was that insurtechs were going to displace companies like mine and be our competitor. Now, fast forward to today, that never really happened. There's a few insurtechs that have gotten to scale. You think about Lemonade and others. But what's happened is that they've really become partners of ours. And we leverage what we do well and leverage what they do well to create these partnerships to drive growth that way. So it's really an interesting dynamic that it's gone from competition to partnership, and that continues today. Next, data, of course, is huge in our business, and we're always looking to leverage big data to do different things, and that starts with smart devices and IoT. But we can use data to use modeling to better inform our underwriting decisions, to handle claims better, and we'll get into more of this in the future. But those insurance companies that can leverage data the best are going to be the winners in the insurance race going forward. And then finally, coverage itself is changing. And traditionally, insurance has had very static policies that cover certain things. But those coverages are getting a little bit more exciting. Parametric is one of those. Parametric coverage, for those who don't know about that, it's a binary type coverage, meaning either an event happened or it didn't. So you think about a farm in the Midwest. There are sensors that will tell us how fast the wind is blowing. And there are policies out there that will pay if the wind exceeds, say, 70 miles per hour. That triggers coverage, and we'll just make an automatic payment to that farmer for the crop damage that might be happening on that farm. But it doesn't pay until that sensor tells us about that. So it's either it happened or it didn't. On-demand policies are new. That's also called episodic coverage. Traditional insurance policies are written for a year. That's changing, where we can provide short-term policies for an episode. That's why it's episodic. It could be an hour, a day, a week. If you need coverage as a dog walker or a videographer, or you're a handyman and you need coverage for a week, that's a new type of insurance policy where you can have it on demand on your phone, and you get coverage that way versus paying for a full year. And then we're always thinking about emerging exposures, and we'll get into some of that in a bit. But all of those things are changing the dynamics of insurance. Next, we'll talk about what is Argo's why. I didn't create this. There's a speaker and an author out there named Simon Sinek, And I've read a few of his books, and I've incorporated some of that into how we innovate. But what we think about is always staying true to who we are. And our mission statement, our mission is helping businesses stay in business. That's what we are as an insurance company. So all that we do in innovation stays true to that, right? So our innovations must align with corporate goals. Innovation requires guardrails in our mind. And so we don't allow people to innovate outside of our core business. We don't want personal lines innovations, because that's not what we write. We don't want to be a personal lines carrier. And so our innovations, we make sure align with our corporate goals. Now, what I think is interesting is that the what, and by what I mean the products and services that we provide, that is constantly changing, but not the why. So I'll give you an example. When Argo started many, many years ago, we were a writer of workers' comp coverage in California and some general liability policies. And that's where we started. That was our what, in order to help businesses stay in business. Now that what has changed, and in recent years, we've written things like D&O, directors and officers, cyber liability, which is new. So these are coverages which didn't exist 30 years ago, but the world changed. And so we adopted a new product, but it stayed true to our mission statement. Now, the what's of tomorrow, we don't know what those are yet. There's going to have to be some new coverages that we provide to our policyholders, but it's going to have to stay true to our why, to our mission statement of helping businesses stay in business. So our innovation process is all about defining and letting employees define what our what is for tomorrow. So that's an interesting, I think, view of staying true to your mission, but coming up with new products and services. So innovation in action, how do we do it in actual activities? We engage in Shark Tank events, as many organizations do. This provides frontline employees with direct access, again, to a group of 7 executives, and they get quick feedback. A lot of this is sort of storytelling. We want employees to think about the future and pitch to the sharks a view of how they see Argo in the future. And then the sharks, the executives, give quick feedback. Either they love it, they hate it, they have some questions. We did our first event in July. It was a huge success. 3 of the 4 ideas that were pitched got executive sponsorship and are into some sort of execution phase. The feedback has been, yes, we love the fact that we have direct access to C-suite, which didn't exist before. Our next event is coming up in December, and we're going to hopefully have these a few times a year. We have innovation conversations, which again is a quick activity where we allow employees to join a monthly dialogue, much like this one, where there's a topic and it's an intimate setting where we can just kick ideas around, and that's a fun activity. We have quarterly challenges. We have an innovation council of about 40 people globally who represent all businesses and functions within Argo, and I present them with challenges, and they work in teams to pitch to a group of judges how they see the future. So that's been really rewarding. We have project sprints and hackathons. And then lastly, we have what we call co-innovation. We work a lot internally within insurance, but we want to know what's happening outside of both Argo and outside of insurance. And so we'll partner with our reinsurance partners. We'll partner with insurtechs and have conversations. And we also will have conversations with academia. That's sort of why I'm here on the campus of ASU today, to talk about co-innovation with folks like you. That gives us perspective outside of our normal day jobs and outside of insurance that really helps us in the process of innovation. So next topic, ensuring the future, the economy of the future. I mentioned that we have an innovation council and I give them challenges. Well, the Q3 challenge was identifying opportunities and threats for Argo from the following: cobots, customer data, and smart cities. Now there's a 4th one that deals with sustainability, and I'll get to that in a second. But these are the challenges we made for our teams, and I'll go through each of these briefly. We look at the future, and in many ways, I'm the futurist for Argo. I want to know what's happening in the economy 5 and 10 years down the road, and identify threats and opportunities that we can capitalize on or prevent. And cobots, which are collaborative robots. sort of sparked our imagination around the manufacturing sector and how we as an insurance company can support those industries and companies that are looking to automate their processes. Cobots in particular, because if you think about exoskeletons and companies that have employees that are constantly lifting objects or doing repetitive actions, that's a leader of workplace injuries. And we pay out claims on workers' comp policies for that. So what if we partnered with firms that are incorporating exoskeletons and cobots into their manufacturing process? Could we incentivize them to adopt those by giving perhaps lower premiums on workers' comp in exchange for them agreeing to use cobots? And so that's one example. And while people think of insurance companies as sort of money-making machines, we really believe in bettering society. And so not only is this a future potential growth opportunity for us, if we can sell more comp policies, it also helps us think about a better future, and we all have an incentive in that, or a stake in that. So, so that's important to us. Customer data, we are constantly looking to use smart devices and IoT devices to better assess risk. I'll give you one example. You think about credit card companies and the transactional data that they have. We've had dialogue with some of these companies to create what we call on-demand or dynamic pricing. As I mentioned, typical insurance policies are based on a year, and we get premium based on a year, and it's based on a perceived exposure, meaning sales of X. And then what happens after the year is we'll do an audit of the policy and true up the premium based on that audit. Now, there's a lot of friction there. We have to order and pay for the audit. The insured has to open up their books and let us look at their numbers. What if we used credit card data as a source of information that we could have monthly pricing? We know based on transactions how much business they're doing. We don't need to audit their books. We can get it from an external source, and we can perhaps offer monthly pricing instead of annual pricing and eliminate the audit. That's just one example of how we can maybe use customer data to simplify the process of insurance. Smart cities, I know, is a topic for many people, particularly at ASU, so I think this is an interesting one. We think about ensuring a changing city landscape. There's a couple of avenues here that we can address. You think about smart traffic grids, where we're trying to ease traffic within a city by synchronizing the stoplights, finding faster ways to get places. That requires cyber protection. You think about an event in which bad actors take over that grid and have green lights all at once, vehicles crashing into each other. Somebody has to pay for that cyber breach or that casualty loss. We want to be a partner in thinking about those things. You think about rising water levels in places like New Orleans and Miami and New York. We can partner on the property insurance side to think about ways to mitigate that risk through services like seawalls or other ways to mitigate that. One of the goals of smart cities is to reduce poverty, crime, and injuries. One of the leading causes of loss for municipalities are injuries, slip and falls, right? You trip over a raised sidewalk slab or a tree root or a construction hole. We want to be a partner with cities to create data or sensors or something that prevents those losses in exchange for lower insurance premiums potentially, right? And then the fourth goal is to raise standards of service. Think about trash collection or policing or any of the other things that cities provide. If we can partner to make those more efficient using sensors and data, that ultimately will lead to less losses for us as an insurance company and better service provided for the residents of that city. A lot of potential there to partner in the smart city realm. Our final topic is ensuring sustainability, particularly the hydrogen economy. So the fourth challenge that I put out for our Q3 challenge was around the hydrogen economy and how we can think about capitalizing on the potential of a real revolution in hydrogen going forward. So here is a quick view from Bloomberg about the state of the hydrogen industry broadly. Today, hydrogen represents about 5% of the world's energy. Most of it comes from what we call brown hydrogen, which is hydrogen derived from a carbon base, oil refining and chemical production. Bloomberg's view is that by 2050, hydrogen could be as much as 25% or a quarter of the global energy consumption, or a $2.5 trillion business industry. I believe personally that we are at an inflection point with hydrogen. And so we want to, again, think about how we can capitalize on that in the future. Part of why I think that I look at a lot of the press around hydrogen. One of the things that struck my attention on social media was that Amazon is looking to hire a worldwide hydrogen leader. When Amazon looks to do things, that certainly sparks attention for many people. And so I do believe that 2020 is an inflection point for hydrogen. And if we as a commercial carrier can capitalize on that, I think that's an opportunity for us. So what are the possibilities for insurance within a hydrogen economy? You think about transportation, there's a lot of that being worked on in Arizona, I would add. There's a view that long haul trucking is likely to move to hydrogen fuel cells at some point in the future. The goal of these companies is to eliminate diesel. There's a view that it will be the battery sector that will dominate short haul trucking in cities, but that long haul trucking in between cities will be driven by hydrogen and fuel cells. That presents opportunities for us as a carrier. Aviation, space tourism, all of these things that seem sort of in the distant future are not so much, and hydrogen will be, I believe, at the center of a lot of that activity. So why wouldn't we as an insurance company want to get ahead of that curve, understand the risks, understand the opportunities, and start thinking about policies and services that we could provide to, number one, mitigate risk in the hydrogen space, but also have policies that are lasered and focused and tailored for those companies that are engaging in a hydrogen economy. At some point, if that becomes a reality, we're going to have to build the infrastructure for that. As an insurance company, we can ensure the construction of filling stations and electrolyzers and storage facilities. We could provide property insurance for the storage facilities. You think about home and building applications. There's a view that that hospitals and hotels potentially might engage with a hydrogen infrastructure because it's silent and it can be self-sourced. Again, there are a number of opportunities within hydrogen and or a clean economy where insurance can be a partner in helping startups understand risk, provide services that mitigate those risks, and ultimately provide insurance solutions to let them launch and become productive. So again, that's just one view as an example. I mentioned a few of the insurance specific policies. I'll mention a few of them here. So there's product warranty, property, casualty, construction, E&O, D&O, and environmental. I think about the possibility of having an industry practice group around hydrogen or clean energy to have expertise on the underwriting side and engage with partners to think about how we can ensure the future of, say, a hydrogen economy. Not science fiction. This is, I think, a real opportunity in the next 5 or 10 years. So with that, I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A. I want to leave you with a couple of final thoughts. I hope that I have at least started to change the impression of insurance as a sort of boring or slow industry. I will tell you that the insurance sector will be a significant player in the process of building a better future. We underpin much of the economy, and we will be a player in launching startups going forward. So my challenge for you all in academia is how can we, insurance and academia, partner to tackle societal challenges? I think there are a number of opportunities for us to work together, but I'm curious if there are questions, thoughts, around that. And I will tell you that as a head of innovation for an insurance company, I am always open to a dialogue with anybody that wants to engage in thoughts around how we can partner on that future. So with that, let me say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all about the intersection of insurance and innovation. And with that, Rebecca, I think we'd like to turn it over to a question and answer session.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was wonderful. Really appreciate your time. We actually have a couple of questions that popped up in the chat while you're talking that maybe we could start with. Chris Barton asked, you mentioned ensuring sustainability. How can you as a company insure against climate risk?
Great question, Chris. There's a couple of things there. First and foremost, again, we can change the dialogue around carbon-based fuels to, say, cleaner sources, solar, wind, hydrogen, potentially. We allow those startups to launch, and in doing so, we hope to change the trajectory of energy going forward to allow some of these startups to be successful. It takes financing, it takes risk mitigation to do that. So we're a financial sector industry, but we can be that partner to allow those sectors to really kind of take off. The other one to think about is flooding, right? Climate change is impacting flooding in particular. 2020, I will tell you, Chris, was an awful year for insurance. All of us are losing money in 2020, not so much on natural catastrophes, but more on inland flooding that we didn't anticipate from our modeling, right? You think about a city like Houston, flooding is going much further inland than we had anticipated, causing damage that we did not anticipate. Within insurance, we have traditional levers that we can pull, right? We can charge more money, we can change the terms of the policy and not cover so much, or we can ask our policyholders to take on more risk, a higher retention, a higher deductible. None of those are innovative, right? That's just kind of our bag of tricks that we can use to address the flooding risk. I challenge folks to think about how can we partner on solutions that really change the dynamic of the flooding problem. Things like how do we build seawalls around New York or Miami, say, or how do we incentivize homeowners to stop and developers to stop building homes in flood-prone areas and move inland? Are there engineering services? Are there financial incentives that we could provide as an insurance company to help people transition from one area to another? Now, one of the challenges, and nothing's ever easy, right, is that insurance is a highly regulated industry. So we have to address that as well on how we can charge premiums to incentivize that move. The point is, though, we need to start thinking creatively and partnering with government, academia, to come up with solutions that change the dialogue from, oh, let's just charge more money, or let's just raise the retention or limit policy terms, into something that's a little bit more creative. So I think it's a great discussion to have. Insurance will be central to that discussion, both pragmatically, but also about transitioning from a carbon-based society. So I welcome your thoughts on that, or if there are other questions, I'd love to hear them.
Yes, so John Vilota asked if you could describe InsurTechs in a little bit more detail. How
Sure,
work.
Yep, absolutely. So InsurTechs are effectively, they generally come from Silicon Valley. These are startups that are looking to solve pain points in insurance. So you think about Lemonade. Lemonade, I believe, was looking to address homeowners insurance. If you're a renter and you need a quick policy, traditionally it had been very difficult to find a policy. You have to go to an agent who sends a submission to an insurance company, and that takes a little bit of time. Lemonade saw a pain point and launched an online portal where you can simply put in your address, your needs, how much coverage you want, and you get a very quick quote back to insure your property as a renter in an apartment. And they have taken off. They have IPO'd, and they are now a relatively successful company that was an InsurTech. Again, so it means basically a startup looking to find a pain point, accessing capital, and doing something that's generally creative in the insurance space? Great question, though.
And please ask your question.
I'm graduating for the third and final time next summer, August, whatever it is. Looking at student loans, some of my student loans are carrying interest rates north of 5%. Is there a way to take a life insurance policy or something along those lines to reduce that rate where my payment for the insurance is a savings versus my current student loan payment?
Great question, Brian. That's a little bit outside of my scope, and that's a problem that probably needs a lot more attention. What I will tell you, though, is that we have thought about not student loans, but tuition reimbursement. And so think about the COVID world that we're in. If you or your family has paid for tuition, room and board, that is ultimately cut short or eliminated or changed in some way because of conditions outside of your control, is there a way to ensure that as an insurance policy? The loans, I think that's a bigger issue that I don't have an answer for.
I didn't expect it to be museum.
It's a tricky one. It probably requires governmental action versus insurance action. We look at sort of smaller pain points, Brian, and are there things that we can address to offer folks with some options and ensure things that are beyond their control. So not a great answer, I know, but that's a tricky question.
All right, thanks.
Oh, Lauren, you have a question? We can have Lauren and then we can do Craig's from the chat.
Okay. Hi, Jeff. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. I have about a decade of experience in the insurance industry and used to underwrite for Argo, and have spent a lot of time being really frustrated in the space of trying to find ways that the industry could innovate to support sustainability. And I'm curious, just from your perspective, what do you see as being some of the best incentives for partnerships, the types of partnerships that you're talking about? Is there a space where you see there being new incentives for those types of collaborations, or how is that space changing and what are you most excited about?
Well, thanks for your question, Lauren. And it's good to talk to a fellow Argo alum. It's a great question. I think about partnering with a number of different stakeholders, as I mentioned. So think about insurtechs that we just discussed. They're looking for back-end solutions, meaning the data that we have, actuaries, claims handlers, that they don't necessarily have. We're looking for quick online portals that we would, it's kind of difficult for us to create. So we think about the synergies of those two dynamics and partner with new lines of business. Episodic is one that we've actually gone into, on-demand policies, where we leverage the front end, the quoting portal of an insurtech, and then they access our distribution network, our wholesalers, to work together to grow that way. In terms of academia, I think that's more relevant to today's conversation. We have these challenges, and we have underwriters and claims people and others that work in teams, as I said, to think about new ways to do insurance, but we're sort of siloed in the insurance world. And so what I really am encouraged about, and I'd love to talk to others about, is working with students such as yourself to use what you all are learning practically in your studies, and use that as a fresh perspective that we as insurance people would not have otherwise had, and give you guys sort of like sprints or hackathons, and let you take an idea and run with it and work in a team and deliver something back to an Argo with a solution. I'll give you an example. We don't really fully understand how Gen Z wants to buy insurance from a commercial carrier. If Gen Z launches a business as a food truck or a dog walker, we don't know how they want to necessarily access us. So I would love if folks like yourself would get together and think about and come up with a business proposal about how best we can sell policies. Is it direct to us? Is it through brokers? Is it through a chatbot? Is it something else that I haven't even envisioned because I'm a sort of an older insurance professional? That's where I think we have to partner and use your perspective and your sort of expertise to give us solutions that we can then bake into how we sell insurance. Does that answer your question? And did you have other thoughts about that?
No, that answers it and it sounds really exciting. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Jeff. So from the chat, Craig asked, what is the intersection of managing supply chains and ensuring against disruptions in those supply chains?
That's a great question, and one that's really relevant to a COVID world. So I'll give you an example. The global supply of food is definitely been challenged by COVID. And so there has to be a way to ensure that risk. So we think about, are there ways to ensure supply chain breakdowns from different sources, pandemic or otherwise? That's sort of on the macro level. On the micro level, I think there are ways for us to help. Again, I always go back to startups. And I think about vertical farming and hydroponics as a way to have locally sourced food, which eliminates the supply chain risk altogether, right? So I live in New York, and there are a number of old warehouses that are converting into vertical farms, where they're growing greens locally that don't require any transportation other than the delivery to the end user, that don't require nearly as much water. They use solar to generate the power to keep the lights on. And it's locally sourced food that generally tastes better than produce that comes from a further distance. Now, if that were to grow exponentially, that again eliminates Arizona, for example, relies on California and Mexico to deliver much of its agriculture. Why wouldn't we think about hydroponics as a way to have food grown in, say, Phoenix, that not only solves a climate change problem, but also solves the supply chain problem? Those are things that I think about. I've looked at submissions that have come into Argo for insuring hydroponic companies. And it goes back to, oftentimes a company will come in and an underwriter will not understand what that means and will decline the business. I love to drill down into it, understand the possibilities, and ensure those startups and let them launch and get scale, so that sort of revolution takes hold and ultimately provides that sustainability and that supply chain risk elimination that I think you're talking about. So it's a great question. And I think it's not about boiling the ocean. It's about finding little pockets of innovation that I think we can support as insurance companies and let them grow into something that's bigger. And if you do a number of those, that sort of moves the needle. So I hope that answers the question.
Good. So Jessica Collins asks, what ways do you reward policyholders who are risk averse?
Well, it's kind of baked into the pricing, right? If policyholders don't take risk or don't have many losses, that's baked into how we price insurance policies. Better loss histories, meaning less losses going back 5 or 10 years, means that you get a better price from an insurance company. Those companies that have significant losses pay more. And so that's happened for a long time. That's nothing innovative, but there is a baked-in incentive system for our policyholders to perform better. What I will say, though, is that all too often, policyholders simply know that they have insurance there, they paid a premium, and they rely on that to pay for them. There's a moral hazard there, in that they know that they can sort of take some risks knowing that there's someone like us paying for the loss. That's why we're trying to change the dialogue to be risk mitigators and offer services to stop the risk from happening in the first place. And so not only will they get lower insurance premium, but if they pay us perhaps a small fee, we can engineer services that will really reduce their losses. And so it's kind of a win-win. They get lower insurance cost, and we get lower insurance payouts by those policyholders that really do want to eliminate risk by engaging in those services. So it's kind of a win-win.
Jessica says, thanks. I have a question. I was wondering, you talked at the very beginning about creativity and the culture of Argo, and how the big shift you really made was employees grassroots. And I love that idea. I wish the world always operated that way. But I have my understanding is you're relatively, you've been in this role less than 2 years. And so I'm just curious, change is really hard for people. How did you get leadership to buy into this idea? And also, were there any struggles where there was pushback, and sort of what was that experience? What does it take to get from a company operating one way to suddenly try to empower their employees in this way?
It's a great question, Rebecca. And yeah, we always face obstacles and challenges. Not everybody supports innovation all the time, right? That's just human nature. I think what's important, though, is that we focused on small wins, right? We didn't want to boil the ocean. We didn't want to transform the company overnight. We just wanted to have some proof of concept, whereby if we identify a pain point, we can actually provide real change and positive results. And if you do that enough times, even on a small scale, that starts changing the opinion from not only the top, but from the bottom. I'll give you a quick example. In a post-COVID world, we were thinking about ways to have a better, more efficient office space. And we had a team that presented an idea to the Shark Tank around a world in which our offices were somewhat automated. You had reservation for conference rooms. We need hoteling now that we're not going to all use our office space. So we want to have a system of reserving actual desks within our insurance offices. We want an easier way for people to have contactless sign-in. And when we have visitors to our offices, when they reopen, we want there not to be a close human interaction, but a more digital experience. So this team pitched it to the execs. The execs loved it because it sort of solved a few problems. And they gave them the funding to execute on this so that we're ready when we return to a new normal, that our offices will be much more digitally advanced. And that was a small win. Folks that were on the call saw that and said, oh, okay, I can actually change the future of Argo, have some fun, probably get paid a little bit of incentive, and bring that change. Those small wins are what snowball and ultimately lead to that cultural shift that I think you're talking about.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Anybody have some things they want to comments, ideas? I do have one more question then for you, Jeff. I think earlier in your visit, you had talked about co-innovation in the insurance industry, often happening with governments, has been happening for a while. I was wondering if you could just give a couple of examples of what co-innovation with government looks like.
Yeah, so that's a little trickier. Government does not move as fast as the private sector or even academia, in my mind. So there's a bit of a challenge there. One example is there was a discussion around having parametric pandemic coverage, which is a mouthful, but we talked about parametric coverage being triggering an event, either it happens or it doesn't. And so there was a discussion with some governments, including the state of New York at one point, and this wasn't necessarily Argo, this happened outside of Argo, around, do we come up with a policy for small businesses that provides, quote unquote, pandemic coverage for the next one that comes? And it's interesting because government is not very good at getting money out quickly to businesses that are facing struggles. Insurance companies are. We pay claims every day, and we can get money to our policyholders instantly, right, through electronic funds transfer. So we talked with governments about partnering on that, whereby the insurance industry would offer policies, very small policies, say $5,000 or $10,000 to a small business. That was parametric, meaning if the government declared a pandemic in the future, we would instantly transfer $5,000 or $10,000 to our policyholders who could stay open and not struggle with making payroll, not struggle with a world in which there are far fewer customers. That is a window to get them to, say, 3 or 4 months down the road when a government solution, a backstop, could come in, and maybe the government at that point would be ready to give sort of a much bigger payout to the industry to keep them propped up. The point is, we're leveraging what we do well. We do quick payouts very well. They don't. We don't do macro payouts very well because we have a finite amount of money. Government, for better or worse, has unlimited funds. So we thought about that, and it never actually launched, but we got into serious discussions around launching a pandemic parametric policy that would alleviate that specific pain point of getting money to policyholders and businesses very early after a pandemic. So I think that's a decent example.
Very cool. One more time, anybody have some last questions or comments for Jeff? on innovation, insurance, innovation in insurance. Okay, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with, Jeff?
I would just challenge all of you to think about your futures and think creatively about the problems that we all face. And it's not all time for pessimism. I would say that we can be optimistic about the future. And if we partner together with, say, insurance and academia, there are ways that we can provide real change to the world. So I know it's a kind of a tough year, but I think if everybody keeps optimistic, we can definitely bring about some change to everybody. So thank you again for your time. I appreciated all of your questions, and best of luck in your academic careers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Take care.